Oh, you're still doing it.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Hi, Clint.
Good. How you doing?
Pal, I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm not doing too bad.
You are not doing too bad. You're fantastic. So you are...
Clint Eastwood is known for being a Hollywood legend, tough on screen, quiet in real life. But at 94, he's finally opening up about something deeply personal. For years, people have wondered why he stayed distant from his son Scott Eastwood. No public statements, no red carpets together, just silence. Fans thought it was just a rumor until now. In a rare moment, Clint reveals the real reason behind the emotional distance. And it's not what anyone expected. Join us as we take a look at the personal life of both Clint and Scott. And take a look at the father-son relationship that has been making headlines quite recently. Climbing the ladder in Hollywood, Clint Eastwood's acting journey began in the 1950s. But real success came when he got a role in the TV series Rawhide. It was a Western and audiences loved it. That role gave Clint the break he needed. Soon after, he became even more famous through a series of Western movies known as the Dollars Trilogy, directed by Sergio Leone. These spaghetti westerns featured Clint as the man with no name. He hardly spoke, but his presence on screen was powerful. In the 1970s and 1980s, he became the star of 5 Dirty Harry films, playing a tough and fearless cop. These roles made Clint a symbol of strength and masculinity. But he didn't stop with acting. In 1986, Clint tried something new. He became mayor of Carmel by the Sea, California. He won and served for 2 years. When it comes to the box office, 2 of his biggest hits were Every Which Way But Loose and Any Which Way You Can. These were different, more fun and lighthearted. He also gave strong performances in movies like Hang 'Em High, The Outlaw Josie Wales, Pale Rider, Where Eagles Dare, Escape from Alcatraz, Heartbreak Ridge, In the Line of Fire, and The Bridges of Madison County. Even in his later years, Clint stayed active. He starred in and directed Gran Torino, The Mule, and Cry Macho. He had his own company, Malpaso Productions, which produced almost all his American films since 1967. Speaking of which, Clint wasn't just an actor. He was a talented director, too. He won Oscars for Best Director and Best Picture for Unforgiven in 1992 and $1 Million Baby in 2004. He also directed Mystic River, Letters from Iwo Jima, and Juror Hash 2, even though he didn't act in them. Other films he directed included Changeling, Invictus, American Sniper, Sully, and Richard Jewell. Clint's talent didn't go unnoticed. He received 4 Academy Awards, 4 Golden Globes, 3 Caesar Awards, and an AFI Life Achievement Award. In 2000, the Venice Film Festival gave him the Golden Lion Award. France also honored him with the Commander of the Ordre des Arts et des Lettres in 1994 and the Legion of Honor in 2007. But while his career was shining, his personal life was far more complicated. A private and complicated personal life. Clint Eastwood was married twice, but he had many relationships along the way. Some lasted years, others didn't. Many of them even happened at the same time. He had 8 known children with 6 different women, but he never confirmed the real number. In fact, he once said, "They're vulnerable people. I can protect myself, but they can't." His biographer Patrick McGilligan also believed the actual number of Clint's children is not known. He claimed that Clint fathered 1 child while he was still in high school. Clint married his first wife, Margaret Neville Johnson, in December 1953. They met on a blind date earlier that year, but even during their courtship, Clint had an affair that led to a daughter named Lori. She was born in 1954 and later adopted by a couple in Seattle. The identity of Lori's mother was never made public, but it was said she was part of a theater group Clint was involved with. Clint kept having affairs while married to Johnson. One of his longest was with stuntwoman Roxanne Tunis from 1959 to 1973. They had a daughter named Kimber in 1964. Clint and Roxanne stayed close friends until she passed away in 2023. Despite all this, Johnson stayed in the marriage. She and Clint had 2 children, Kyle in 1968 and Allison in 1972, but things were never really stable. In 1975, Clint began living with actress and director Sandra Locke. She was married too, but it was a marriage of convenience. Her husband was gay and unemployed. Locke once said Clint told her, "She made me monogamous," and even claimed he said he had never been in love before. Clint finally divorced Johnson in 1984. Locke, however, stayed married to her husband until her death in 2018. Bill Brown, a publisher from Carmel, once said Clint considered Sandra Locke the love of his life, yet Clint never publicly spoke about her passing. More children, more secrets. During his time with Locke, Clint had another hidden relationship. He was involved with Jaslyn Reeves, a flight attendant. Together they had 2 children, Scott in 1986 and Catherine in 1988. At the time, both kids were listed as having no legal father. When Clint and Locke split in 1989, Locke filed a palimony case against him. She later sued him for fraud too. Both cases ended in settlements. In the 1990s, Clint dated actress Frances Fisher. They had a daughter named Francesca in 1993. Then in 1996, Clint married again, this time to news anchor Dina Ruiz. She gave birth to their daughter Morgan that same year. This marriage lasted until 2014. After that, Clint was seen often with Christina Sandera, a restaurant hostess. They never publicly confirmed their relationship, but they appeared together many times. Christina passed away from a heart attack in July 2024 at the age of 61. Later that same year, Clint was seen with someone new, but nobody knows who she is. Clint has stayed silent, and so have his team members. His spokespeople and managers have always refused to talk about his personal life. You see, Clint's life has always been a mix of public success and private mystery. Fame, awards, and unforgettable roles on one side. Secrets, silence, and hidden relationships on the other. But the most mysterious part of Clint Eastwood's life wasn't his fame or his films. It was his role as a father. And no story shows that better than the one involving his son, Scott Eastwood. Scott Eastwood, born to a complicated family. Scott Clinton Reeves, better known today as Scott Eastwood, was born on March 21, 1986. He was born at the Community Hospital of the Monterey Peninsula in California. His mother was Jocelyn Reeves, a flight attendant. His father, of course, was the famous actor and director Clint Eastwood. But their relationship wasn't public for a long time. Scott has one full sister, Catherine, born in 1988. He also has 6 known half-siblings from Clint's other relationships: Lori, Kimber, Kyle, Allison, Francesca, and Morgan. Growing up, Scott lived in Carmel by the sea until the age of 10. After that, he moved to Hawaii with his mother. He spent about 4 years there before coming back to California. He then graduated from Carmel High School. After high school, Scott went to Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. He earned a degree in communications in 2008. But unlike most celebrity kids, Scott didn't live a glamorous life. Even though his father was rich and famous, Scott had to earn his own way. And the bond between father and son, it was distant for a long time. In fact, when Scott was born, his birth certificate didn't even list Clint as the father. Instead, it simply read, "Father declined." That line alone tells you how strained or private things were in the beginning. Clint had an affair with Scott's mother for years, but it ended in 1990. By then, Scott was just 4 years old. Still, Scott did spend some time with Clint while growing up, but there was no red carpet treatment. In 2017, Scott told Men's Health, "My dad never gave me a cent. He made me work for everything." That's the kind of upbringing he had. Strict with no special favors. But Scott wasn't only dealing with family complications. His life would take an even darker turn years later. A heartbreaking loss. No one expected. Scott Eastwood may have looked like he had it all. Good looks, a famous name, and a rising career. But in August 2016, he revealed something that had haunted him for years. In an interview with GQ Australia, Scott said, "I dated a girl a couple of years ago who died in a car accident. At first, it sounded like a terrible accident. But then he shared what really happened. And it was shocking. It was a fender bender." He explained. There was a recall on the car's airbags. The airbag exploded and sent a piece of metal through her body. It split her spine, he said quietly. "I've never told anybody that." That moment changed him forever, Scott said. "I think that really affected me. Maybe it's made it harder for me to date." His voice, his words, it all sounded like someone still in pain. And who could blame him? To lose someone in such a tragic and unexpected way leaves a scar. Even though he didn't name her, the pain in his voice told the whole story. It wasn't just a loss. It was something he carried with him every day. And when you pair that with the rocky childhood and the pressure of living under Clint Eastwood's shadow, it paints a very different picture of his life. Still, despite everything, Scott kept pushing forward. He worked hard to build a name for himself. But what most people didn't know was he wasn't even using the Eastwood name in the beginning. A different name, a tough climb. For years, Scott didn't use the last name Eastwood. Instead, he went by his mother's name, Reeves. That was the name he used for auditions. And yes, there is another actor named Scott Reeves. But this one was different. Scott said he wanted to avoid nepotism. He didn't want people to think he was getting roles just because of his dad. He told Men's Journal that he only started using Eastwood in 2008. By then, he had already done some work and had earned a little respect in Hollywood. "I just thought, oh, this is silly. If I'm doing this, I've got to carry on the Eastwood name," he told Nylon in 2015. But even then, it wasn't easy. He worked all kinds of jobs to make ends meet. I parked cars, did construction. Anything on the side to make extra, he said. Hollywood may have known his last name, but Clint Eastwood didn't open doors for him. Scott auditioned for many of his father's films. He was rejected more than once. One of those times was American Sniper, which is Clint's own film. Scott said he understood. His dad was tough, but fair. No special treatment, no shortcuts. Instead, Scott had to prove himself with other roles. He appeared in Gran Torino and Invictus, both directed by Clint, but they were minor roles. He got more attention with movies like The Longest Ride, Fury, and the music video for Taylor Swift's Wildest Dreams. He also played big roles in Suicide Squad, The Fate of the Furious, and Pacific Rim Uprising. Still, no matter how many films he did, some people kept calling him an overnight success. Scott didn't agree. It's the furthest thing from the truth, he said. It takes a long time to find your way. The audition that hurt the most. In 2014, Scott saw another opportunity to act in one of his father's biggest projects, the war drama American Sniper. Clint was directing, and Scott auditioned for the role of Jeff Kyle, the brother of the main character Chris Kyle, played by Bradley Cooper. This time, Scott really hoped it would be different. He had been working hard, building his own name in the industry. But again, the role went to someone else, Keir O'Donnell, an Australian actor. Scott later laughed about it, saying, I auditioned for American Sniper and didn't get a role. It stung, of course, but it also pushed him further to make his own path. Ironically, that rejection led to something better. Around that time, Scott was offered the lead role in The Longest Ride. 2015. Looking back, he saw it as the right turn in his career. I would have loved to have been part of American Sniper, but then I wouldn't have the opportunity to do this film, he said. From that point on, Scott began getting major roles without his father's name attached. He starred in movies like Suicide Squad, The Fate of the Furious, Wrath of Man, and Pacific Rim. Uprising. It wasn't always easy, though. Many still believed he got roles because of his dad. Scott had to speak out, saying, it doesn't work like that. He can't just pick up the phone and say, cast my son. Speaking of which, one of the most talked about parts of Scott Eastwood's life is his relationship with Clint Eastwood. For years, it was unclear. Was it close? Was it distant? In 2016, the two gave a joint interview to Esquire. That interview finally gave fans some answers, a moment fans never expected. It was the first time Clint Eastwood and his son Scott Eastwood sat down together for a joint interview. This happened in 2016, right when both had movies releasing at the same time. Clint was promoting Sully, the true story of the pilot who landed a plane in the Hudson River. Scott had a major role in Snowden, playing a government officer in Oliver Stone's film. The interview took place at Clint's production office on the Warner Brothers lot in Burbank, California. He had been working there since 1975. Clint, now 86, still went to the office almost every day. He loved working, editing, creating. That's where he was most alive, while walking to the office. Clint even pointed out that he leaves peanuts for a local squirrel. He comes right into the office sometimes, Clint said, showing that even at his age, he found joy in the little things. But don't let that fool you. Clint Eastwood was not the type to slow down. He was still directing films, still pushing himself. Most people quit in their 60s, he said. Why would you quit? That attitude defined him. And as fans would soon see, it shaped his son, Scott, too. But getting to this point, of doing interviews together and supporting each other, wasn't always easy. For years, Clint and Scott had a distant relationship. Scott grew up in Hawaii with his mother, Jocelyn Reeves. Clint wasn't around much during those years, and they only started spending real time together when Scott moved to California as a teenager. The age gap between them, 56 years, was wide. Their personalities were different, and yet, when they sat down for that interview, something finally clicked. Old school father, tough childhood. When asked about their relationship, Scott didn't hold back. I lived with my mom in Hawaii until I pissed her off, and then I came to live with my dad and pissed him off, he said with a laugh. Clint just smiled and said, he was a pretty good kid. He added, his mother gave him a lot of values because she's a good person. That comment said a lot. It showed that even though Clint wasn't around much, he respected the way Jocelyn raised Scott. Scott called his father old school. He said Clint raised him with rules. Be on time. Show up and work hard. That might sound basic, but coming from Clint Eastwood, it meant everything. Scott said he learned about respect, responsibility, and discipline from his father. Even as an actor, Scott felt the pressure. Clint was tough on him. He never gave me a cent, Scott once said. He made me work for everything. That included trying to make it in Hollywood. Scott auditioned for many of Clint's films, but often didn't get the part. Even for American Sniper, Clint passed him over. Still, Clint was watching. He always came in and did a good job, Clint said. Now the chicks are calling and asking where Scott is. They used to ask where I was. Scott laughed and replied, I'll take you out to the bar with me. It'll be fun. They clearly had chemistry, father and son, both with strong opinions, but learning to respect each other's journeys. Scott said he was still learning and growing, adding, I'm just a kid in this business, finding power behind the camera. Scott talked about something he had noticed from watching his father work. That film is more of a director's world than an actor's. If you're not creating your own material, then you're just fighting for whatever's out there, he said. Clint agreed. He explained how back in the 1950s, he was a contract actor. He had very small roles, but instead of waiting in his trailer, he stayed on set and watched others work. When I had days off, which was most days, I'd go down and watch other sets while they were shooting, he said. He wanted to learn everything about how films were made. Scott remembered something his dad told him years ago. As an actor, I never went back to my trailer. I always hung out on set and learned, Clint had said. That stayed with Scott. Even while filming Fast and Furious, Scott made sure to stay around the crew and ask questions. That's how Clint learned too. He recalled his early days at Universal in 1954, getting one-liners and being forgotten. But he kept showing up. He watched Joan Crawford. He watched directors. That's how he got better. When Scott was asked how he planned to stand beside such a legendary father and still be his own man, his answer was simple. I just do what he does. Keep moving forward, Clint added. With everything you do, learn something new about yourself. That was the secret, he said. Always grow. Always evolve. Instinct over advice. One of the most interesting parts of the interview came when Clint spoke about choosing projects. He said that instinct has always guided him. He remembered his lawyer and agent begging him not to do every which way but loose. This is a piece of shit, they told him. It's not the kind of thing you do. But Clint liked the script. He liked that it was different. It's not happy ever after, he said. The girl dumps the guy. I like that. He made the film anyway. And it was a huge hit. The public loved it. That's why Clint always followed his gut. Nobody knows anything, he told Scott, so don't listen to anyone else. He repeated it again. Nobody knows diddly. They just think they do, Scott agreed. He said he tries to learn from his dad every time he gets the chance. He even flew to Georgia just to watch Clint direct Sully. Clint praised him. He's doing great. He's on the right track. They both admitted that the journey isn't easy. You just keep making movies, Scott said. Hopefully you make some good ones. Probably gonna make some bad ones along the way. But the key is to keep going. Keep learning. And most of all, trust your gut. That's what Clint had done for decades. And it's what he's passed on to his son. The advice that mattered most. Even though Clint never handed Scott roles on a silver platter, he did share meaningful advice. In August 2024, Scott opened up during the premiere of his film 1992, where he told people what his dad had told him when he first thought about becoming an actor. Follow your gut. That simple line stuck with Scott, and he kept going back to it whenever he had to make a tough decision. Back in 2022, Scott spoke to Insider and revealed another moment of fatherly advice. He was offered a 3-movie deal by Warner Brothers, including a part in the Suicide Squad sequel. But the offer wasn't good. According to Scott, they didn't want to pay me any money for those next movies. They also didn't have scripts ready for the next 2 films. It felt rushed and uncertain. So Scott went to his dad and said they don't want to pay me. Clint's response was clear. If it feels like they really need you, and if it's a good part, then do it. If not, then don't. That advice gave Scott clarity. He realized he didn't have the answers he needed, and he was being pressured, so he turned down the deal. It wasn't the easy path, but it was the right one for him. Speaking of which, the work ethic that Clint instilled in Scott stayed with him, and despite the ups and downs, Scott never gave up. He also hinted that he might one day step behind the camera, just like his dad. Like he says, it's feast or famine for an actor. If you're not creating your own material, then you're just fighting for whatever's out there. I definitely have the desire to go to the other side. So far, Scott's journey hasn't been easy. He wasn't instantly welcomed into Hollywood. He was once disowned by his father, used his mother's last name, and kept his head down while working small roles. But he never stopped pushing forward. Clint Eastwood may not have given him big roles, but he gave him something even more valuable. Honesty and lessons in self-worth. And now, Scott Eastwood stands on his own feet, not just as Clint's son, but as an actor who's built something real from the ground up. But what about Clint Eastwood? After losing his partner of 10 years, Clint Eastwood's life has recently changed quietly, but deeply. How Clint is coping now. Christina Sandera passed away in July 2023 from a heart attack. She was just 61. Clint was 93 at the time. The two had been together since 2014 when they met at his Mission Ranch Hotel in Carmel, California. She was working as a hostess there. They connected and made their red carpet debut at the Oscars in 2015. Her sudden death was a shock. The cause was cardiac arrhythmia, and she also had coronary artery disease. Clint shared a short but heartfelt message. He said, "Christina was a lovely, caring woman, and I will miss her very much." According to a spokesperson, Clint preferred to grieve privately, but despite his heartbreak, Clint continued to show strength. In early 2024, Scott gave an update on his father. He told people that Clint was doing good. Scott called him a survivor and a trooper. He talked about how his father had seen hard times before. Clint was born in 1930 during the Great Depression. He lived through World War II as a young boy. According to Scott, that kind of life builds a different kind of strength. He saw a lot of struggle, Scott said. "It's in our blood. You don't complain. You don't whine. You just do." Clint is now 94. His health has become a topic of quiet concern, especially after Christina's death. But Scott says his father is still pushing through. No drama, no complaints, just that same strong spirit he's always had. And while Clint has kept a low profile since Christina passed, Scott's words make it clear. The man who once played the toughest cowboys and cops on screen is just as strong in real life. What Scott thinks of his dad today. Scott Eastwood may be building his own career, but he still holds deep respect for his father. Over the years, they've had their ups and downs, especially early on. Scott was raised mostly by his mother, Jaslyn Reeves, and only acknowledged by Clint publicly in 2002. But in recent years, their bond has clearly grown stronger. In 2024, Scott spoke lovingly about his dad. He called Clint an inspiration. He said he'd love to work with him again. In the past, he had small roles in his father's movies like Gran Torino and Invictus. Even though Clint didn't give Scott an easy ride, Scott still appreciated those chances. He always had to audition, and sometimes, even then, he didn't get the role. Like when he tried out for American Sniper in 2014. Clint didn't cast him, and Scott said, "I auditioned and didn't get a role." Still, there's no bitterness in Scott's voice today. Speaking of which, Scott is not only working hard, he's also carrying on his father's mindset. "If you're not creating your own material, then you're just fighting for whatever's out there," he once said. Just like Clint, Scott wants to go behind the camera someday. And even after everything, the distance, the auditions, the rejections, Scott still calls his dad a man he wants to work with again. They may not spend every day together, but there's a quiet understanding between them now. A shared past, a shared strength, and maybe, one day, a shared film set again. And even though Clint kept his name off the birth certificate, he still acknowledged Scott later on. In the end, the two may not have had a perfect father-son story, but they had something real. It took time, effort, and forgiveness. And for Scott, none of it was easy, but it made him the man and actor he is today. What do you think about the relationship both father and son share? Tough love or true respect? And do you believe Clint made the right choice by not giving Scott an easy way into Hollywood? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. See you next time.